the July show of Purposely Unplugged with Lori. She's back from lunch, had a big old steak. She's ready to get at it. We're going to talk marriage, aren't we, Lori?
Yes, we are.
And some of the great steps that you need to take to have a solid, fun, enjoyable, loving marriage. So take it away. I'm all ears on this one.
Well, one of the keys, Dave, is just a couple having shared activities and shared meaning. That's often where couples find joy. So perhaps an activity you do together, perhaps as they have children, animals, shared joy, shared meaning seems to be one of the biggest things that contribute to a happy relationship.
Okay, I totally buy into that. And the consistency in the relationship I've found for these 29 years that I've been married seems to be the important aspect. Is that's part of this as well, isn't it?
hmm Consistency around shared joy, consistency around communication, consistency around intimacy, consistency around time together. Those really seem to be the top keys.
Is it early in the marriage where is in a lot of cases where you find that bumpy road a little bit? Is that like, you're when you're first starting out, everything's new and exciting, but at the same time, you're trying to understand the other person to show respect and compatibility. Compatibility. Go ahead.
Well, and there's different stages that a couple will often go through. So at the beginning, it's the euphoric stage. Usually we are fairly happy. We are getting to know each other. We are finding joys in the differences that we notice. But at some point that shifts for most couples. It could be 6 months, it could be a year. Generally, you see a shift that first year in. And then you get closer to attachment. It's the identification of what you like, what you love, this close connection with the person. But then, Dave, by year 5, by year 7, we're hitting crisis. We're kind of disillusioned. We've got some decisions to make. Those things that we thought were really cute and lovely when we started dating and got married may not rub us the same way at that point. But then the good part of the story is by year 7, the relationship deepens again. By 10, and by 15 or 20, usually couples are saying that they love wholeheartedly. This means that there's acceptance of each other's imperfections.
That's a big thing, isn't it? Like, I mean, really figuring out a way to work through some of those issues that you might have and understanding each other better. And I think like a lot of people during their marriage will go through career changes.
Mhm.
Kids come along. There's just quite the diversity of things you got to navigate as a team. And that's maybe, if you're not on the same page, I guess in a lot of those cases, things can fall apart, correct?
They can fall apart, but they can also come back together again. So I'm glad you said it that way. If you look at John Gottman's research, he really indicates that sometimes in marriage, that when things break down like that, one of the best steps to do is just to kind of back down and ease around and listen and appreciate the other person. So he actually speaks to sometimes it's not always about winning. And I really like that because when I talk to anyone about conflict, I'm like, can't conflict be a win-win, not a win-lose? Why does someone have to lose in a conflict?
I think too, the art of conversation is really critical because I do think that you need to have those hard conversations and those fun conversations, but at the same time, already understand your boundaries in that conversation. So like you said, a win-win, you want to make sure on both sides that you're looking out for each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, then years ago, I was lucky enough to attend Family Life Canada conferences. And I remember one of the speakers saying, do you want to be right or married?
And let's leave it at that.
Well, and I
No, that's
Googled it this morning and it actually popped up. Like that saying is more well known than I thought. So when I Googled it again, it did actually pop up. And when you said good communication skills, you're absolutely right. Because good communication skills is the key to resolving issues.
yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of times that maybe um, in my scenario, I know I've done it where I'll say, no, I'm not bringing that up today. It's not the right time or the place. I need to think this through. And that's the step back, isn't it? Sometimes I think in both sides of any relationship, you need that step back. And maybe you've got one single thought in your head and you need to sort of expand on it to understand it better before you can have that conversation. Is that critical?
That is critical. And actually, that's exactly the way Gottman explains it. So, absolutely, just that stepping back, that reflection. And it's not that someone loses, you're just gaining more information. You're just communicating in a calm way. And you're maybe picking a time that where each of you have good energy levels. And it's just a better time to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think too, as your marriage goes along and the term grows longer, you understand each other that much better. So you understand, maybe like you said, in those early stages where you're not sure, in that year 5 or something, oh, I don't really care for this idea, or but later on you sort of know what to expect when that occurrence occurs in someone. I'm really getting vague here, but you can frame it better so you understand what they're going through. And I think that's the other part too, is I can go to work and have a bad day. Monica might go to work and have a bad day. But as long as we can get home and talk about what our days were like, big difference. Because maybe before we didn't talk as much about our days. And, I'm not understanding what she went through. She's not understanding maybe the situations I had to deal with in the day. And I think that part of it too is, like we talked about earlier, the communication, but also it's that, that mindset of thinking what the other person their day may have been like, right? In all aspects of life.
Hmm. And if we want to talk about it that way, the three things to think about is mirroring, validation, and empathy. So if we're speaking to someone by mirroring back to them what they said, making sure we understand, asking if there's more, by validating. So I think this means this, is that right? And then empathy, I wonder if this is what you're feeling. What are you feeling as we talk about that? And that model is Imago. IMAGO, Imago.
Imago? Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
When you look back at all the information that you've gathered over the years in your jobs, do a lot of couples come to you? And,
Absolutely. And in some cases, I have one part of the couple come to me, and then a different therapist will work with the other part of the couple to do some individual work until both are ready to then do their couples work together. And then they'd be seeking a third therapist to do that. That's the easiest way to keep it and to have everyone's needs met.
I was just going to ask you that, because I don't think I wouldn't you, if two show up, if a couple comes to you, isn't it he said she said? Like, does it become that, or are people strong enough now to be objective and say, no, you're right, or like you said, you've got to go to an individual, you've got to straighten out your own stuff, right, before you can sit down with another person in your relationship and figure out those problems. Am I close?
It's a good idea just to have some grounding in where you're coming from, just grounding in what you're thinking, and really just reflect on that if you can first. So that's one way. Sometimes couples go directly to couples therapy, and that works too.
Okay.
It can work either way. It just depends what is happening and who reaches out first. Do they reach
Well,
out together? Does a husband reach out? Does a wife reach out? Who reaches out first?
do you see a lot of cases where maybe the guy doesn't see the problem, but the woman does? The guy's just sort of, and it can go either way. I'm not trying to frame guys here, but does that happen a lot? Like, we're just out to lunch on some of these things?
Well, and I've seen it where it's not about gender at all. It can even be
Yeah.
a non binary couple where it's not about that at all. It's just about personality and viewpoint and perhaps our upbringing too. Dave, we all bring our history with us as to how we expect things to go.
Yeah. I think the biggest part of marriage that I had to figure out was the we, not the I.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times guys struggle with that a little bit, because we are independent. We do like to do our own things. And when you become that in a relationship, that's one of the things that probably takes us, in my opinion, takes us a little bit longer to understand the we, not the I. And it's understandable. I mean, you grow up like that, and then you enter this relationship. So you have to understand that it's a team concept now. And that's the only way it's going to work successfully.
Mm-hmm. And as part of just reviewing, you said communication a couple times. I looked at marriage.com. The top 10 things that couples argue about. Number one is communication, and number 10 is poor listening skills. So in the top 10, we've targeted two different pieces of communication. So I'm glad you've brought it up. And that is part of the we, not I, because when we communicate like that, we can develop the we, not the I.
Perfect. If folks want to get a hold of you, if they're going through some crisis like this, how do they reach out?
Cell is always best, 226-934-7425. Email or website are fine as well.
Um, Last thing, I think you got to do something with your rooster. I don't. Maybe you should feed him. I don't know. She's outdoors, folks. That's where she does her best work. Go
Yes.
visit her. She'll help you along. I want to give a quick shout out because I know you were interviewed for the July Hub, and I want to say a quick hi to Kevin. And thanks, Kev, for going out and hanging out with Lori. And he did meet Mask, didn't he?
Kevin did meet Mask. He went right in the pasture and he petted Mask. It was a lovely visit. Thank you, Kevin.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for doing this, Lori. You have a great month, and we'll talk to you next month.
Take care.